Cataclysmic Events, 2002. The Proof, Part 1, 2003. The Proof, Part 2, 2004. Gangs of New York. I am the Emperor. In Rome, he gave me king. My hood, the pain don't stop. I'm a thinkaholic, man, my brain don't stop. You get tired if you want to, the game don't stop. Once you on, the fame don't stop. They say when I spit, it sound like I'm crying.
So, Money Monsters TV wants my take on Black History. Black History Month, Black History. So, I mean, that in itself, that's an amazing question, because how far back do we go? You know, I mean, some scientists say the first bones were found in Africa, the very first bones. And then the Quran says what's translated to mean that Adam, the first man, was made of molten black mud. So how much of the history are we going to go into? So I'm going to start with some more contemporary history, you know, Black history. By saying Black History Month, I'm going to talk about Black history in the United States of America. You know, some of that Black history, you know. And some of that is, you know, some of that is good, and some of that history is painful. So that's, for the most part, what Black history means to me, is the history of, you know, Africans in this North American continent of the United States of America. That's what it means to me in a nutshell. And then there's many different aspects and facets of it. You know, you got, I mean, so much. You got politics, you got entertainment, you got entrepreneurship, you got athletes, you got inventors. I mean, we go on and on.
Man, respect it due, so don't you neglect it. You see me give shorty rhythm.
When we get into Black history, right, we say Black history. And what we learn in school that's Black history is we learn that there's a group of us that are called Black. Now, I beg to differ with that, because for me, in my understanding, when you say Black history, you're assuming that the person that you're talking about, or the people that you're talking about, have direct ancestry in a patriotic line back to Africa, meaning, you know, their fathers in African. And we know that in America, there's many people that have black or brown skin, and their patriotic line doesn't go necessarily back to Africa. It might actually go back to North America, to a Cherokee tribe or Iroquois tribe, or it might go back to Europe. It might go to, you know, to England, to Dutch, to Holland, to France. So then now, you know, that gets us into the point of how do we classify Black, and what is Black? Is it what, you know, the powers that be have determined as what's Black? Is a pool of people that have black or brown skin, or non-pure Caucasian? You know, is that what determines Black? Or is Black actually someone whose great-great-great-great-grandfather was from some part of Africa, whether it's Senegal or Ghana or so-and-so? You know, because, like, for instance, you speak to a person who calls himself Latino or calls himself Hispanic, right? He could be very, very dark-skinned, or she could be very, very dark-skinned. She could be dark-skinned and have coarse hair. She could be dark-skinned with coarse hair, or he could be dark-skinned with coarse hair and have African features, you know, in his facial features. You know, his nose, his lips might resemble those of a West African. Yet, he or she may say, no, I'm not Black. I'm Latino. I'm Hispanic. So what does that mean? That means that they're identifying with some of the culture from, you know, Puerto Rico or the Dominican Republic. However, the reason that they have dark skin and the reason that they have coarse hair is because somewhere in their patriotic or in their mother's line, right, they had some West African in them. So now that brings us back a little further back into the Black history of this continent. So now we're going to have to get into the transatlantic slave part. I know I said that it was some good and there was some pain. That's definitely the pain, right? So when we get into the transatlantic slave trade, we know that there were boats from Portugal and Spain. That's the Iberian Peninsula. That's the most western southern part of Europe, right? The Iberian Peninsula, which is Portugal and Spain. There were boats at that time, you know, in the early 1400s, that were attempting to find a new route to India. So they decided to go all the way around Africa, you know, because, you know, otherwise they had to go through the land routes, and the lands were locked by the Turks. The the Ottoman Turks were in control of the land routes. You know, the spice routes. Spices were very, very expensive at that time, and they were in control of that. They had to pay heavy taxes. They might get beat up, pounded out, get their pockets robbed, or whatever the case may be, or just told they can't go. You know, they can't come to there. So, in their quest to find a new route, they said, let's go all the way around Africa and find a route by ship. Now, on this way, somebody discovered, or somebody had the idea that, wow, these people, I guess they can be subjected to us. I don't know whether the kings or the chiefs at that time were willing to sell their slaves, to these new people that they had never seen before. In any event, somebody made a deal and they began to trade slaves. They began to buy people, human cargo, from West Africa, and then bring them on a route from West Africa to the Caribbean islands. The Caribbean islands consist of Puerto Rico, Cuba, Jamaica, Trinidad, and all these different places. Once they got there, right, there were also a people that were native to those islands. There was Taino natives, Arawak. These are all different tribes and names. As when you get on the mainland, the more familiar names are the Cherokee and the Navajo and the Iroquois and stuff like that. Once they got there, these people were also subjected. They were colonized. These people were also subjected to the colonization of the European powers at that time. They had stronger steel. Their swords, very, very powerful, made well, stronger steel. And they also had access to gunpowder. They say Marco Polo went to China or whatever the case may be, and they had gunpowder, so they had guns. So these people, as well as the African tribes, they had more primitive weapons at that point in time. Spears, long spears, things like that. And even ride horses the same way, saddled horses. So they were dominated militarily, by the Spanish, the conquistadors, whatever the case may be. So now you have a mix now. You have a mix of European from Spain and Portugal, West Africans from Senegal, Ghana, and what was formerly an empire. I think it was, at that point, the empire might have been Mali or Ghana at that point. I have to check that out again, which empire it was that was kind of in its dismal going out, and then you had the natives, the Arawaks, the Taino, and all these natives on these islands, and they mixed. They mixed. So from there you get black, right? You get what we would say is black, and also those Africans that were brought to Virginia, they were brought to Virginia, and they were mixed again with the natives here, the Africans, and the Europeans, the English, the Dutch, so on and so forth. So now, because the Spanish initially landed in the Caribbean, and a lot of the Caribbean islands are dominated by Spain, that's the language of the oppressor. That's the language they speak there. Also, in those islands, the English came in. They had, they fought a little bit. They bumped heads with the Spanish, and they won some land as well. They said they had rights to colonize as well. And then that's where you get Guyana and Jamaica, speaking English. And then you go into the Americas. So there you have it. Someone calling themselves Latino or Hispanic, and someone calling themselves black, have the same history, so to speak. The only difference is that the colonizer being from Spain, a Spanish European, or an English European, which would be the language. So that's why when we say black, is how do we classify it? Because again, some people here in North America may have a patriotic line that goes back to a black African, like Barack Obama, who's actually really, and he's a real African American. He's black, so to speak. Because according to science and according to scripture, you are your father. You go back to your father's line, your father's line, your father's line. So whatever your father is, that's what you are. You're a mix. Say your father is Asian, he's Chinese. Your great grandfather's Chinese. Then you would be considered a Chinaman, even though he might have married, a woman from Italy, from Rome. You'd be mixed, but what would you be? You'd still be a Chinaman, because you are your father, and that's according to science and according, scripturally speaking. So some of those people here, we know for sure that some of those guys. I mean, like one of the presidents. I want to say that it was I want to be right with this president. I'm going to go ahead and jump out the window with this one. Well, you know what? George Washington was also involved in this, but I think it's Thomas Jefferson that I'm trying to put my finger on, that had, you know, relations with his slave and had children with one of the slaves, and those children end up proving later in life, the descendants of those children proving that they were, because the family didn't want to accept them as being related to Thomas Jefferson. They didn't want them to be buried. They didn't want any rights of being, but it was proven by DNA, you know, that he treated her well. You know, he treated her actually like a co-wife. He treated her so well, they were forced to accept her. They were very upset about the treatment that she got. You know, he confided in her. He took took advice from her, so on and so forth, and treated his children, you know, as equals, so to speak, is what happens. So would those children then be black because their patriotic line goes back to Thomas Jefferson, who in no way is from Africa at any time? You know, I don't even know if he stopped there. You know, so you get into what is black, you know, first. So we got to define what is black. I define black, you know, I go with the scientific and the scriptural definition, which is to be actually considered black, you would have to have a patriotic line that goes back to West Africa. So I know a lot of us are going to check out DNA and stuff like that. You know? But as far as the culture that the oppressor names as black and the oppressor names as Hispanic, you know, in America, we know who we are, right? I guess. And that's anybody with a great grandparent. I think you get 1/8. That's what it is. An octoroon. 1/8. If you have a great grandparent that is African or looks black, then you black. You know? And with that description, you got a lot of people like Alexander Hamilton that they don't know. You know, he's from Nevis. That island was known for a lot of interracial mixing. So a lot of these people would fit the category of black. I mean, just look at the spectrum in entertainment. You know, Mariah Carey is black. You know, Jason Kidd. You know, these people are as light color as they come, straight hair, but they still, you know, hold on to the roots of being black.
My hood, the pain don't stop. I'm a thinkaholic, man, my brain don't stop.
Yeah, inspiration. That is vast, grand. We can go back as far as Senke and the Amistad, you know, and we can come all the way through with all those revolutionary figures, those who refused to lay down, you know, those who stood up in the face of oppression, mentally, physically, spiritually. Denmark Vesey, you know, Nat Turner, Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth, Frederick Douglass, you know, I mean, and then we can continue to come forward, you know, through time, you know, all the way to the 60s, you know, Medgar Evers, of course, Martin Luther King Jr., you know, Martin Luther King Sr., Malik Shabazz. I mean, we can just go on and on with the inspiration of those who being in a condition, in a situation in which it almost seems like anybody would just quit, lay down, and have an excuse, have a valid excuse to quit. They stood up to the utmost for not just themselves, but for the people, so that they would be inspired, you know, and they inspired me, you know, and many others have been inspired. You know, you can see it in Huey Newton and Bobby Seale that they were inspired, and you can see it in Maya Angelou and Assata Shakur. They were all inspired, you know, by just the struggle, the human endeavor, you know, not giving up. You know, these people saw obstacles not as what was stopping them, but as something that they had to get over, get under, get around, and that was it. You know, and so I'm inspired by all of them. You know, Adam Clayton Powell Jr., Thurgood Marshall. You know, you can go into the political field. You know, and then like in our intellectuals, you know, you have to mention Frederick Douglass, who had to sneak and had to be so cunning in learning to read. You know, and became to the point where he wrote, you know, one of the all-time bestsellers, or, you know, most read books in America. You know, Frederick Douglass. And Malik Shabazz, who read the whole entire dictionary until he was able to articulate himself as a grand orator in front of kings and heads of state throughout Africa, the Middle East, all the way to to Europe, to the Parliament and in front of colleges. So these inspirations, I think a lot of times, I feel that as a people, we forget all these revolutionary leaders, Che Guevara and Cesar Chavez, and what they stood for, and we kind of get lazy and lackadaisical in what we consider freedom, and sometimes we enslave ourselves mentally, and we become enslaved to lust and pride and arrogance and laziness, and that's definitely not what they stood for. So that's a part of Black history that inspires me, and I like to remember, and I like to bring that part back out, for the people, because now we're in position to do things, to learn. We're allowed to go to the best of schools, the Princeton, the Yale, the Harvard, as well as the Howard universities and such. We're allowed to do that, whereas before, it was illegal. You could be killed. We were allowed to vote and form a block and put in people who we believed would make some kind of a change or could make a change. Had the ability to make a change. 'Cause just because you put somebody in who can make a change doesn't mean they will. And once the power is in your hand, once you're in the seat of power, that's the real test. So, yeah, those inspirations dictate some of the things I do and say. Why we have this genre, as far as in the entertainment horse, is why we won't, use the profanity and the vulgarities. Why we want to push the bar. We want to push the bar. We don't want to stay in the box. We want to be our own lane and invent our own lane so that the children and the youth can see that there's other alternatives from what's already there. Not to downgrade or downplay who is there. However, what's there is pretty narrow. Is pretty much, the one lane. You've seen it before. Juice, Set It Off, Boys in the Hood. It's kind of the gangster, the Ebonics, the Real Tough Just Came Home. How much drugs can be sold? The Real Rough, the Pride, the fighting over pride. The murder off of ego. That one lane. The spending, the vast spending, the waste. The women kind of like running through the women and stuff. You saw it before. The partying, the big party, the fantasy that never ends. The waking up high, the going to sleep drunk. That's the narrowness that's there. So we want to definitely push the bar into what else is there: the intellect, the mind, the poetry, the art. The success. And that's one of the reasons why I was inspired to go into the marketing. Because that's an intellectual field dealing with the psychology in the mind. And so you can always look for the inspiration from those from the past to inspire you, and then maybe you can be an inspiration, work to be an inspiration for those now.
My hood, the pain don't stop. I'm a thinkaholic, man, my brain don't stop. You get tired.
Well, I like that. I like that a lot. I agree with it 100%. And that's one of the reasons I specified and clarified in the beginning. I went through that whole long monologue, so to speak, about Black history. But yeah, Black history is definitely American history, and there's no way that you can separate them, and the two are intertwined forever, for eternity. Black history is American history, and I feel that, again, to say it's labeled like that because they say the conquerors write history. That's the saying. And so when they wrote it, they didn't want to sound so brutal, but that's what it was. It was barbaric, and so they labeled Black history, maybe in a way to separate the inhumanity of that situation and those acts from American history, which for the most part wants to be looked at in totality as a good thing. How could half of it be so bad, And so I bought some memorabilia to the interview. I have on a traditional Moroccan thobe, and I'm not sure if everybody recognizes or knows that Morocco was the very first nation to recognize and acknowledge the United States of America as a sovereign nation, and also gave them a gift of about $1 million or so. Yes, and Morocco, for those who don't know, is one of the northwestern parts of Africa, which always was a great empire as well. And the Moors are from Morocco, and those are the Africans who took over the whole Iberian Peninsula years before the slave trade started, for about almost 1,000 years, almost a millennia, for about between 700 and 900 years. And Cordoba, Spain, was in full control of the Moroccan Africans, and it was a learning center for the whole world. The Africans, the Arabs, the Europeans all traveled to Cordoba, and Muslims, Christians, and Jews lived there in peace. I mean, there was some spats, but they were all protected under the government, under the law, and they lived there in peace for, like I said, almost a millennia. So a lot of that history was lost. So I brought some memorabilia for you guys. You know, I have the traditional scarf. You know, that's the kifaya that comes out of, you know, the same area, northern Africa, and I have the Moroccan thobe. So for you guys to check out, it's traditional. It's made of some really nice, almost feels like camel hair. You know, really nice. When it's warm. It's February out there, guys, and I also had to bring my Black Power pick. You know, Malik Shabazz was one of the favorites, and this, you know, just brings me back to the whole era of the Panthers, and you know, Snick, and all those movements, you know, from the 60s, when we were all about knowledge of self, finding our culture, uplifting our women, respecting them, you know, building the children, educating them. And so I brought some of that for the ambiance of Black History Month with Money Monsters TV.
Man, my brain don't stop. You get tired if you want to, the game don't stop. Once you on, the fame don't stop.
So with that being said, I just want to let everybody know that NervRakrz Entertainment is a total solution marketing firm. We want to utilize the most futuristic technology and apply that in order to bring sales across to all parts of business, whatever it may be. You know, understand it's a system that's put in place to converge sales for you and your company and your business, whatever you may be doing. Whether you're an independent entrepreneur, a sole proprietorship, a corporation, whatever it is, whatever is your endeavor. You know, we have understood the techniques. We're dealing with the mentors that have succeeded. These guys have actually succeeded. They're making the millions. They're not just telling you stories. And they've put in place the techniques and the technology that's necessary in order to get these sales for you, you know, to make the conversions, you know, to capture the attention, to bring the leads and to turn them over to actual sales. So that's what NervRakrz Entertainment.com is all about. It's for you guys out there, you know, you guys and you gals that want to have that budget, that want to place yourself in the big league, the big guys, that want to be financially educated. NervRakrz Entertainment.com, or you can just Google NervRakrz, NervRakrz. Just Google NervRakrz. You can catch all of the interviews, and you can go straight to the website and check us out. So I'm here today for you. And I want you to know that with hard work and with the proper education, we all can succeed and go straight to the top. You know what I'm saying? So check us out. We got something for you. You know, whatever it is that you do, whatever it is that you want to do, education is the way to get it. All right? And right now, marketing education turns into financial education, and that equates to putting yourself in a position to make those dollars, you know, because that's what it boils down to. You got to be financially able to move with the big guys. You got to think like them. So check us out. Emperor, CNC, NervRakrz Entertainment. You can catch us at www.NervRakrzentertainment.com, and you can send us any of your info at NervRakrz@gmail.com. And I'm here today with Money Monsters TV at MoneyMonstersTV.com.
My hood, the pain don't stop. I'm a thinkaholic, man, my brain don't stop. You get tired if you want to, the game don't stop. Once you on, the fame don't stop. They say when I spit, it sound like I'm crying on the mic. These fake ass rappers just be lying on the mic. So I switch my flow like I'm flying on